Yep. Oh, kia ora koutou. We're going to start our meeting now. It's 1 o'clock. We have some preliminaries to go through, Century Mountain, before we get to you guys. But no mahara mai koutou. He pai ki te kiti e tō kana he koutou. So, kia ora. Ah, that's Don. I knew that. We're going to go into a couple of preliminary things, and then we'll bring you guys to the table, or whoever is at the table. I'll run through a couple of roles for you guys, and then we'll go straight into the presentation. So, apologies. We have some apologies for this morning. Tipper, Russ, and Barry. Okay. Tipper, Russ, and Barry.
I'm online for at least some of the meetings, so I will be in attendance for at least half the meeting. Thanks.
Ka pai tēnā, Barry.
And early departure for me.
He's got that. Confirmation of agenda. Yep. Ka pai tēnā, that's done and dusted. And disclosure of interests. We don't need a move or second for that. So, Central Mountain, if you bring up who you are to the front there, I'll do a couple of preliminaries I need to go through. So, although they're on the screen, you'll understand. Yep. Hey, Phil. So, do you normally do an introduction before the trustee? Okay. So, welcome. This seems to come up so fast, but hey, it's lovely to see you guys, as always, with the mahi that goes on there's ka pai tēnā. We're going to do an introduction, I believe, and then I'm going to run through just a couple of rules that keeps us online, so you don't get offended if I decide you've gone over or something like that. Yeah. So who's doing that introduction?
So I'll start off. So kia ora koutou. So just for the reminder of councillors, this is a bit of a unique setup for Natural Heritage Fund this time around. If you recall, ICMC made a decision at their last meeting to refer all applications to full council, just to enable all of the applications to be considered as a holistic meeting. So that's what we have today. So the structure for today is that we will give a brief introduction from a team. So today I'm joined by Patrick Whaley, a manager of biosecurity biodiversity, and also Judy Van Rossum, our advisor in the biodiversity space. So we'll go through an introduction. We will hear from each of our applicants today, and then there will be a time for deliberations and decisions at the end of the meeting that's set aside. So I will pass over to Judy and Patrick first to give an intro before we talk about some ground rules, and then forward.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors, and also guests as well. So today we've got 4 Natural Heritage Fund applications being presented to Council. So as you know, the purpose of this fund is to help protect the natural heritage and biodiversity of the region. So we're looking at native plants, animals, threatened ecosystems. It is a key method under the regional policy statement for protecting biodiversity. So just want to reiterate that. So how do we select the applications? I've just got a couple of slides, so I'm going to make this really quick because we do want to hear from the applicants. So we don't actually have a funding round. We do work with the applicants, they approach us. We work up the proposal, and when we feel that it's at a stage, we then bring that to council. So the kinds of aspects of the applications that we're particularly interested in is looking at how much they're applying for funding for, the kind of costs that they're requesting. We're looking at the contributions from other parties, whether they can get funding from other organisations. And we also particularly look at the track record of the group. So these applicants are all well-established community organisations. They've got a significant presence in the community, and they have usually a significant volunteer component to their projects as well. So the scale and the impact of the project is also important. So that's not just around the biodiversity aspects, but it's also about the scale in terms of the community involvement, and it's also about the area that they cover as well. So that's kind of a very brief overview of that sort of process that we go through. We've got the assessment criteria for all of the applications, which is in the covering report, so I won't go through those in detail. But the questions in their applications, which are the attachments to the agenda, are aimed at those assessment criteria. So we're really interested in how well the project meets the criteria and determining whether the project will result in improved biodiversity outcomes. So the last slide is just the 4 applications that we have. So we have Maungatautari up first, and then the Waikato Environment Centre Trust with the Bush to Burbs project, Thames Coast Kiwi Care, and Mahakirau Forest Estate Society. 2 of these applicants have had funding before from the Natural Heritage Fund. So those applicants will talk to their applications and also include some information about how the previous grant has helped their project. So if there's no more questions, I would like to hand over to the applicants.
So before we do that, I needed to ensure that my 2 manawhiri up there actually knew who they were talking to. So talking to Waikato Regional Council is not, doesn't mean it's the right box to tick. So I'm going to introduce them because our time is pretty short. So at the top we have Kathy White from Tuwharetoa. You know Stu Kneebone for many years. Fred Litchwark is from Raglan area. Jenny Nicol is the councillor for Hamilton City, is that right? And Dennis Teague is the councillor for Thames Valley. I'm Kataran Hodge, and I'm everywhere. And so online we have Angela Story, who's also Hamilton's, Angela Strange, who's from Hamilton City, Pamela Story, who's the Waikato, Huntley area, yep. And of course Barry, our chair, who is Hamilton City. So those are the councillors that are on today. And so when I pass it over to you 2, we unfortunately have limited time, as you know. We have question time too, which only will be pertaining to your presentation. And when your time's up, unfortunately, you're going to have to move so that I got time to bring in a new people. And if I don't get the chance to say, hey, I'll see you guys later on tonight, it's either one of us are going to be wearing a hanky, me because I've given you so much money, or you because you didn't get any. Hei aha, ka pai tērā. Okay, all yours.
Kia ora koutou katoa, Madam Chair, councillors, thank you for your welcome. I think most people know me, but I'm Ko Don Scarlett Takuinoa. I am co-chair of Sanctuary Mountain Maungatautari. I'm here proudly representing my co-chair, Poto Davies, and the whole of the MEIT board. I want to take this moment to preface our team's presentation by thanking your council for your long-standing support for our project. I know that your support has been material in enabling us to achieve what we have to date, and that's not a small thing. It is through your support, combined with the endeavours of many who have gone before us, that we have the largest secure inland predator-free sanctuary in the world, just 50 minutes drive from here. It's actually 49. When you walk into our sanctuary, you walk into predator-free New Zealand right here, right now. And of course, there are Kiwi there. 0 to over 1,000 in the last 15 years. And I think you all know much, much more. Further, We are very proud that we have pivoted our biodiversity project into one that is delivering multiple well-beings inspired by the UN SDGs. Deliveries that are aligned with the Waikato Wellbeing Project's framework. We have much more that we are doing and more that we can do. We are working hard to add translocation of kakapo to our achievements. Madam Chair, you alluded to that. We have a solid enterprise and an inspirational team. We have momentum. Your co-funding support, as we've proposed in our application, is vital to us continuing to grow our multiple wellbeing deliveries for our community, for the Waikato and for Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ka kite.
Kia ora koutou, ko Phil-Anne's tōko ingoa. I am timing, so we've got 17 minutes 28 to go. What I'd just like to do shortly will be to bring my team up, and we're going to do a bit of a tag team today, just to share the story. So today, obviously, we'll present our funding application to the Natural Heritage Partnership Programme. Thank you for this opportunity. Whilst our funding application has very specific details relating to the delivery of our biosecurity plan and budget, it is important to highlight the interrelatedness of each of the parts. Simply put, our partnership enables the foundations to be laid for our restoration mahi on the Maunga. Together, we are positively impacting and contributing to the creation of strong, vibrant, and resilient communities. This is our theory of change. If I could ask Judy, could you just move through to the next slide, please? Thank you. And I'll hand over to Sanctuary Manager Bodie Taylor.
Ora tō ia moi te waka ki te uru ngā te waka ki te moe o te waka ki te takoto rangai takoto oi te waka. Kia ora tātou katoa ku rangatira. Sanctuary Mountain has been around for centuries. The first arrival of our tupuna no waka o Hoturoa. The waka's name was Tainui, of course, landed here in 1350. Upon that beautiful canoe of ours, the waka haurua, there was a tohunga named Rakataura. Rakataura was responsible for naming the mountain Maungatautari. When they arrived to a bay called Whaingaroa, which is Raglan, they climbed the nearby mountain there called Karioi. When they got to the top, it was there that the significant mountain was located. Its vitality was booming. Therefore, he named it Tautari. And this is the actual pātai he asked. Ko wai te maunga e tautari ana. Who is that mountain that is suspended in the skies? So from that point, that mountain was named Maungatautari, and to this day, it continues to have that legacy. When our tupuna arrived to those beautiful sanctuaries, for example, Pirongia, Taupiri, Kakepuku, it was Rakataura that named those mountains. And so when they arrived, it was well known to us, even today, the stories that we're told, that when they came into those eco sanctuaries, they were deafened by the sound of birds. They were deafened by the sound of the mauri of that mountain. And so it is our dream and aspiration that we share the mauri of the mountain as it truly was. So that's my kōrero for today, origin of the name, Maungatautari. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Bodhi. So today, our team's presentation will be in three parts. Firstly, we'll share with you how our restoration mahi is having a positive impact and building an ecological foundation. Part two shows how our ecological foundation supports and builds well-being. And finally, part three details the operational specifics and financials of our application. I'd now like to invite Dr. Janelle Ward to join us. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou.
One of the core goals of Sanctuary Mountain Maungatautari is to increase the Indigenous dominance and species occupancy at Maungatautari. And that includes by the sustained removal of predators, obviously, and also by the reintroduction of species. So far, we've introduced 14 species back to Maungatautari, and this includes on the page here some that are incredibly sensitive to predation by rats, stoats, and other pests, such as the hihi and the North Island kōkako. We've reintroduced 10 species of birds since 2006, and here's just a few of the highlights recently. The North Island kaka that we were reintroduced through a captive breeding program through zoos have gone on to establish flocks of birds, and some of these we know have returned to Maungatautari year after year. They're banded, and we see them again returning, coming to breed at the mountain. We have North Island kōkako, which were reintroduced, and when the survey happened in 2020, we found they had over 100 territorial birds, which was more than double the previous survey. This is actually one of the fastest known reproductive increases in kōkako on the mainland, and in other sites they have actually continued to decline in the presence of pests, so another vulnerable species. Last year we introduced 80 riflemen to Maungatautari, and through surveys happening this year we found that they have already bred successfully on the mountain. We continue to actively manage 4 species, and one of those, the takahe, we are apparently one of the top 3 sites nationally for breeding of those birds, with 21 juveniles raised successfully at Sanctuary Mountain Maungatautari. We don't just focus on birds. There is a lot happening in the research space around invertebrates, also fungi, and many other species. Tuatara were reintroduced in 2012, and our survey last year showed not only that we were recapturing many of the founders, 75% or more of the original Tuatara was still alive, but we also have the presence of juveniles, which shows successful breeding and recruitment. The frog survey happening last year and this year shows that Hochstedt's frogs are either stable to increasing, and we plan to increase the amount of sites surveyed for those frogs. Over 37 species of fungi have been recorded as new species not seen before, just through the last year of a new researcher looking for fungi at Maungatautari. So there's much, much more still to be discovered on site. And we've created 80 permanent lizard survey plots to try and establish how our populations of geckos and skinks are doing, but also perhaps rediscover species that were known to be there. And if we don't rediscover them, we can reintroduce them. The picture of the volunteer there just goes to show that many of these surveys couldn't occur without all the volunteers that assist. And press again. So of course, the big one on the agenda is kakapo, and Maungatautari represents one of the only sites on the mainland currently that could house kakapo comfortably and even perhaps one day have a breeding population. Next, Kiwi. And I won't go through all the details of this with the restricted time, but suffice to say we now have over 400 founding Kiwi on the Maunga, which are breeding rapidly. 1 in 5 that we caught this year were founding birds, showing that all the rest had been bred on site. We have over 1,000, we think, on the mountain, with call counts increasing every year. Next slide. And it's a bit hard to read that, but we are continuing to look at how we translocate these species out, and we've begun that process this year. And we will be translocating those Kiwi out to the wild from Maungatautari Kohanga.
Kia ora, Janelle. I would now like to share how this amazing ecological foundation supports social well-being, building strong and resilient communities. Warwick and then Rosie will briefly share some highlights of how this translates into quality education, health, well-being, jobs, and economic benefit. Thank you.
Waikato, ko Warapura ho. I'm a ranger and educator on the Maunga and live 10 minutes away. I'm speaking on behalf of our team leader, Tali Jellyman, who's the lead educator there. So if you can go to the education slide, please. That's great, thanks. Our education program is focused on ensuring inclusive and quality education for all and promoting lifelong learning. Some of our recent highlights are on this slide. They include providing pre- and post-visit resources to schools, running teacher professional development workshops, webinars, and continuity of programs through virtual learning and outreach. And the feedback, if you'd like to have a read of that, really highlights what teachers and students are getting and the huge impact it's having on them, and the high level of satisfaction from the program. One brief story encapsulates that. We had a local school visit. One of the 5-year-olds was really taken by the kaka. He went home. A week later, he saw a kaka outside his house, told his mum, who knew me, and she messaged me, all excited about this kaka, wanting to know more. So our education program is impacting not just the students, but also whānau communities. Thank you. Yeah. Slide, please. So I put my cadetship and jobs in nature hat on. So Sanctuary Mountain has a huge impact on local communities, particularly from an employment point of view. Last year, we started a pilot cadet program in partnership with Te Ohomai Institute in the Bay of Plenty. We had 4 cadets work with us part-time and study part-time. One of the impacts of that is that they have increased competence, as shown in the graph there. Not only that, but when we had Jobs for Nature funding come in late last year, we were able to employ 2 of them already trained to get straight into the mahi on the Maunga. Right now, we've got 3 cadets working part-time until November. And we've also started Jobs for Nature funding. So that allows us to employ 4 new rangers for 3 years to carry out essential track maintenance, fence maintenance, and fence upgrades. Thank you.
Kia ora, Warwick, thank you. And Rosie.
Tēnā koutou, ko Rosie aho. Volunteers are very much at the heart of our project. They contributed 13,000 hours to the project last year. So that equates to 7 full-time staff. And by volunteering, you actually do get benefits as well. So if you'd like to move to the next slide. We were able to quantify the benefits to volunteers in a survey that we did. We engaged with Huber Social and Impact Hub, and over the last 12 months we had run a survey across 3 groups: the volunteers, our local community, and our wellbeing program participants. Locals were defined as within sight of the Maunga. And these are some of the results hot off the press. Statistical analysis has shown a meaningful relationship between being able to visit Sanctuary Mountain and the Maunga, and it's frequently as desired, and higher overall wellbeing. Volunteers scored feeling part of the community significantly higher than the local community does. So Sanctuary Mountain is fulfilling a need for community connection. Volunteers have been with Sanctuary Mountain for 3 or more years or come out often, so more than once a month, had significantly higher wellbeing than less regular or newer volunteers. And priority needs of wellbeing program participants saw increase after taking part in the program, and outcomes were correlated to higher wellbeing. So those are fantastic results for us. Next. And this is just the program. So Rongorakau is led by a local kuya, and she's a practitioner. It's got a beautiful authenticity to it, and it's been really popular. Our wellbeing celebration, which we did in the middle of Omicron, it was great, and we got good feedback on that. Meditation we've done for the last couple of years. We do a day one, and we did a moonlight meditation this year. And then the forest immersion programs, we do a public version, but it's mainly aimed at corporates, and that is around employee wellbeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. And if I could ask Owen now to come and share with everybody, and this is the detail of the specific funding around our biosecurity mahi on the Maunga. Over to Owen.
Kia ora tātou, Owen Woodward, Biosecurity Team Leader. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 4 key goals, biosecurity goals, and I'll outline how the work that we do to deliver on those goals. So firstly is to ensure that no pests enter the sanctuary via the pest-proof fence. So the pest-proof fence is a key piece of infrastructure that enables all of the associated ecological biodiversity and community benefits that are gained from the project. It's a major piece of infrastructure that requires constant monitoring, regular inspection, maintenance, and repair. Now, to ensure that no pests can enter the sanctuary, the fence must be monitored 24/7, and rangers must be able to respond to all breach warnings within a 90-minute time frame. There are 33 warning gates that are monitored electronically, but in addition, must be regularly checked. And this is often 2 or 3 times per week, especially through the wetter times of the year, as the stream flow can fluctuate. Maintenance is often required on surveillance boxes, replacing batteries. There are 185 fixed screen culverts that must be checked quarterly. There are 57 pedestrian gates, 12 vehicle gates. This is the infrastructure, the scale of the infrastructure that we must maintain. So there are also roads that must ensure access to all these pieces of fence line. And this is often on very steep terrain and requires maintenance of road surfaces, drains, replacements of metal, and likewise for internal roads, the quad track and monitoring lines. The fence line must be kept clear of vegetation at all times in order to prevent pests from using it to gain entry, and to keep the surveillance wire clear in order for it to be operational and for its monitoring to be effective. So all roads, tracks and monitoring lines must also be kept clear of vegetation, another large piece of work. In order to prevent the reinvasion of pests, incursions must be quickly detected and invaders eradicated as soon as possible in order to prevent them establishing within the sanctuary. And to do this, a monitoring network is operated by staff and includes many volunteer hours, which helps us achieve this vital goal. Our second key biosecurity goal is to have a state of preparedness for any incursions or threats to the integrity of the Maunga. So this requires rangers to be able to and willing to respond at all hours in all conditions and to be highly familiar with accesses. So in the middle of the night and inclement weather, we're able to get to anywhere on that fence line where there may be a tree through the fence. So we must have vehicles that are capable of making it to all of these locations, equipped with the tools and materials to remove fallen vegetation, fix or replace damaged fence, or erect a temporary fence for the night. And over the past financial year, there have been 15 major fence breaches, and a number of those have been all together at the same time, which of course puts quite a strain on rangers, but it's a challenge that we enjoy responding to, we relish. So thirdly, the goal of ensuring the predator and herbivore pest-free status of the Maunga is maintained. So key to this is the pest monitoring network. So we have a monitoring network of a huge number of tracking cards, and we employ a number of other methods. Quarterly, we place 3,849 tracking cards over the Maunga. We have 388 rat traps and 648 dock traps that are that are regularly serviced. So it's our goal that we'll maintain a network of predator trapping within the Maunga capable of intercepting 100% of any incursions. So this is achieved as this is, yep, thank you. I'll go back to the previous slide in a minute, but this is, yes, this outlines our monitoring network. So you can see that puts it into scale how many of these stations that we have, and this is between 50 and 100 meters between those dots. So we have volunteers and rangers out there all the time covering that landscape. So yeah, we achieved the removal of any incursions 100% of the time, and that's achieved through high density. This is to get pests to zero density. We have a high density of monitoring and a regular servicing of fence line traps. In addition to keeping Maungatautari pest free, we also work to remove the control invasions of exotic pest plants that can threaten the native forest ecosystem. And we have GIS mapping systems that monitor this. So just go back quickly to the back 2 slides.
So have you got much more to go? Unfortunately, you're going to be the last speaker.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually. Yep.
Hi, kia ora, Owen, thank you. And could I just please have 2 minutes just to round off the financials, and then I will promise.
1 minute.
Thank you. Could you please just go through 2 full slides on to the tree? Next one, next one, next one. Thank you. I'll be very quick. So I'd like now to share with you how this translates in our partnerships, translates into funding relative to our partners' sanctuary operating budget and our proposal to the Natural Heritage Partnership Programme. Thank you. Next slide. As reported in our summary partnership report, the last 4 years have seen Sanctuary Mountain working to increase the capacity and capability of our sanctuary team. This graph relates to the last 4 years of funding from Waikato Regional Council, projected budgets and actual expenditure. The trend shows increasing sanctuary-related expenditure for all of our fence track maintenance work, additional team members, staff training, supporting health and safety systems. Slight dip in 2020 represents COVID, where we were unable to complete some activities, but we made up for that in the ensuing years. Next slide, please. This graph shows the first year of our funding request. It is just over $1 million, has been the theme throughout our presentation today. Partnership is the key, with funding contributions also from Waipa District Council, Jobs for Nature, community funders and visitor revenue. Next slide, please. And now our amazing volunteers. As the team have alluded to, volunteering brings many benefits. This includes economic, and as Rosie mentioned, this equates to $275,000 worth of volunteer hours annually. Next slide, please. This drills into the budget that's in the application. And I just draw your attention to the fact there are many partners involved in this contribution to the Maunga. And one area that in our application talks about communication and education. And although that is included in our application, that is not included in our funding request to Waikato Regional Council. So many people contributing to the kaupapa. Next slide, please. So finally, this slide shows Sanctuary Mountain's actual and projected expenditure from 2018 to 2026. The first 4 years have been detailed earlier in the slides. Please note the jump of expenditure at the end of this year from 850,000 to 1,026,000. This is due to the Jobs for Nature funding and cadetships providing full-time rangers. Important considerations are the impact of inflation, the risks of climate change, and an aging fence. The reality is that any multi-year funding of a longer horizon goes backwards without an inflationary adjustment. This year is a good example with CPI at 7%. To help mitigate this impact, Sanctuary Mountains application has built in a 3% annual increase of funding. This is illustrated in gold on the graph and in the application. Next slide, please, and I'm finished. So in summary, through our partnership, the technical support and funding provided by the Waikato Regional Council lays the foundation to deliver our theory of change and contribute to a region where Maungatautari Maunga is a sacred source of spiritual pride and prestige for mana whenua. Endangered native fauna, waterways and flora are healthy and thriving. Forest recreational activities enhance the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of children, adults, older adults in our region. Mana whenua actively connect with and use their land for social, cultural and economic well-being. Jobs are created, as we've shown, with conservation, education and tourism contributing to the Waikato economy by telling our ecological and cultural story. And finally, vitally important, our tamariki understand their role as future katiaki. Kia ora. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Maungatautari, e mana sei, titiro atu au, aroha kauana, e rua aku ringa, pitirawa ki Waikato, hei piriti mai mau e tama, e taku manai e. E rua haku ringa, e maunei ia hau, ko tahi hei pera urunga, ko tahi hei awhi mai, ko tahi hei pera urunga, ko tahi hei awhi mai.
Kia ora koutou. Our questioning is going to be very quick as we have a time limit now, and I've given you more time for your presentation and less time for questions, but I do believe that presentation will be going out to councillors anyway, and that's great. Great presentation, guys. Questions? Quick, sharp, to the point. Fred.
Have you got any land snails? No land snails, yet to come. Third question, I noticed Plant Plus biosecurity areas being covered. I congratulate you for that and being in front line. And third, where's my gold button?
You just used it and broke it.
I just used it. All right, thank you.
Happy.
Yeah, thank you. Look, you've done really well, and I think you know, you've got such a good track record, and especially over recent years. And I think just want to point out that we do have a lot of pride in this project and the community input and the commitments, everybody. So just say that. I did have some questions about the predator-proof fence, but I think you have covered it in there. My question mainly was just, are you so you're putting money aside regularly for the replacement of the fence, and you're doing that on a regular basis. So I just wanted to check that there wasn't going to be you know, you coming to us later for a large sum of money specifically for the fence. That was the one question, but the other one, if I could just ask at the same time, is just, I mean, I have raised this with you before, but I'd just like to know whether you've made any changes in the sanctuary in relation to this. I know there have been wildlife deaths in sanctuaries when people have used brodifacoum poison in their bait stations. You know, places like the Kaka at Pukaha, Tuatara from eating poisoned cockroaches down at Natureland in Nelson. And I know you did have a takahe that accessed bait from your bait station. So I'd really just like to know if you've made any changes, what changes have you made, or at least what have you considered to try and reduce the risks for the wildlife that you're trying to protect in there?
Could I first answer about the fence?
Yes.
And then I'll hand over to the team.
Thank you.
I could have somebody with an answer, please. Yeah, so in terms of the fence, I think we recognise that the significance of the capital outlay 2035 from memory is when we, it was sort of getting to the end of needing replacement. So part of the work that Warwick was describing around a cadetship and Jobs for Nature. So what we've started doing is replacing a kilometre annually, and then all that information is being stored in GIS so that we've got a permanent record of fence that's been replaced. So rather than coming with a request for 25 million in 20 years' time, we're actually just replacing, and it's just going to be an ongoing process now, so we know exactly what every piece of fencing is, the condition it's in, and the age of it. So just slow and steady rather than a big ask. And that's covered in that operator.
Who's answering the other question?
And the other?
You want to come closer? We've got people online. And can you keep your answer precisely?
Yeah,
that
sure. As
they're
for the
needing to
brodifacoum, we
answer?
are still using brodifacoum. We're using less. We're using diphacinone and double tap as well. So to use less brodifacoum. And the bait stations in the Takahe enclosures, they have been modified to be very secure for Takahe.
Okay. So to just, so I think you used to have bait stations like every 150 metres or something, didn't you? But it looked to me like you were saying they're just around the actual external fence line now. Is that right? Is that what I'm
We actually have bait stations around the fence line every 50 metres,
right.
but they are now only used when we have an incursion.
Right, okay. So are you trying to actually reduce your brodifacoum? Is that a goal of yours, that you're trying to do that because you recognise there are some risks?
Yes, the goal is, I believe the target is to only use brodifacoum once during the lifetime of the longest lived native species in the area, and we use diphacinone largely for our pest responses now, but we also do use brodifacoum.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to close it down now. Your time, you've been bang on time, then Senator, close it all off. But thank you for your presentation, guys. And as per usual, Maungatautari Sanctuary Mountain is exactly what everybody says it is. There is not much I can say. So after we finish today, there's a big space of time where we will go through deliberations as a council. And I don't know how long between now and when you get an answer. How long are we waiting at? A week? 5 days? You should have an answer back in at least a week or so on the outcome of today. So thank you, everybody.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for your time and allowing us to go over our time on our presentation as well. So kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Just to be on the same page, I do believe the next lot of people is 10 minutes for presentation and how long for questions? Okay. Yep. Okay. Yep. That's okay. So if the next lot is ready, it'll be great. And they're running in line with the paper you gave us, say the next one here is the Nature Heritage Fund. Yep, I got them here. Yep. Start when she's ready. When she's ready, and I'll do a. You don't go through that introduction again, do you? No, I'll just make sure they all know who's around the table. Kia ora korua. Are you nearly ready? I don't want to rush you. It's okay. I'd just like to introduce our table to you, our staff, and who you might not know, and there are people online. Okay, so welcome to today. We look forward to your presentation. As you know, your presentation is only supposedly to be 10 minutes. Then we've got so many minutes for questions. So I'm going to quickly go around the table and tell you who we all are. And then you can have a short time to introduce yourselves as well, okay? So at the end there, you've got Kathy White, who's the councillor for Taupo, Stu Newbone, who's a councillor for King Country and Waipa, Fred Litchwark, who's a councillor for Raglan, and Dennis Teague, who's the councillor for Coromandel, Thames area. And online we have Barry, if he's still there, he's our chair, but was unable to come in. He's for Hamilton. Angela Strange, she's also Hamilton councillor, and Pamela Story, who is Waikato Huntley area. I'm Katarana Hodge. I'm one of the two Māori councillors, and my area is Katai Nauta. On this side is Greg Ryan. He is the director for ICM. Right? And of course, at the back is, and this gentleman here is really important to how the meeting goes and doesn't go. This is David, and everybody else around the table is staff, and of course our manager at the back of the Romakasi services. So welcome to the table. It's now your time. We do have a timer. I'll try not to be rude and interrupt you, but you do have 10 minutes. All yours.
Kia ora koutou. Ko tau regular ho, I lead the team at Go Eco. Next to me is Karen Barlow, who's the organiser for biodiversity, predator-free person. And behind me is Jade, who may be known to many of you, local legend in biodiversity and restoration. We're pleased to be here today to support this application and hope that we do not require the full 10 minutes actually. We are a little bit rushed. We have been, well, I have been planting at Maungatautari this morning, so I'm a little bit rattled, so please bear with me. The Go Eco, or the Waikato Environment Centre, is supporting this project through capability and capacity building. Bush to Burbs is a collaborative project. Can we have the next slide? Thank you. We don't have many slides. It's a collaborative project for biodiversity protection, and the area of this project is focused around Maungatautari Sanctuary and between there and Cambridge. The collaboration is to distinctly work with landowners and to support the development or the increase there of native bird life specifically in the Cambridge Township area and the rural areas surrounding that. It's an extensive collaboration that includes Predator-Free Cambridge. For technical advice, you can see it all there. There's an expert steering group, which is made up of local landowners and a further 200 properties that are stakeholders in this project. Ngāti Koraki Kahukura, that is a developing relationship. The local marae is also part of that. And of course, Waikato Environment Centre provide the administration and employment infrastructure to support the project. Over the past 2 years during development of this project, that has been happening on a small scale, and the conversations have commenced and been started and supported through that process. So there is some of this work happening on a small scale. And the reason that we're here today is to try and scale this project up. The next slide. One of the challenges that we have with projects such as this is funding. So we just want to say and acknowledge the staff here that we appreciate the opportunity to tono for funding to increase the impact of this project. Scaling up has that effect. has the effect of increasing impact. And I'm going to pass over to Karen, because Karen knows far more about what happens out there than I do.
Hi. Bush Suburbs is only happening because of the amazing work that's being done at Sanctuary Mountain. If it wasn't for that, this project wouldn't be going ahead. Birds and bats are spilling over the fence as it is now. Bush Suburbs connects the Maunga, the work being done on the Maunga, the regionally significant Turahonga Halo project, which is already a Waikato Regional Council project, and the mahi of the work that's being done by Predator-Free Cambridge. In Cambridge, there's backyard trapping programs. We've got 50 volunteers doing community trapping over 9 sites in the Waipa area. Bush Suburbs combines those 3 projects, and it equates to a huge area of managed land if Bush Suburbs goes ahead further than what it currently is. It's a unique site of 11,500 hectares. We have 2 natural boundaries. Almost half of the boundary is Waikato River, and obviously the Maunga makes up part of a large part of the boundary as well, which is predator proof. The area is primarily farming with increasing numbers of lifestyle blocks. There's 12 covenants within the area, 200 properties, but really only 160 landowners, and that's key. There's 4 hubs, Maungatautari, Horahora, Kairangi and Rotorangi we've lumped together, and the Leamington Link hub. We have a steering group of locals which are knowledgeable of the living in the area, and you'll hear from Paul shortly. Farmers, restoration experts. There's a lot of people already doing predator control. There's a lot of people doing restoration work such as planting in the gullies, fenced off areas and restoring wetlands. So there's already a lot of work being done in the area before we're coming into the picture. Farmers particularly are already doing lots of predator control, mostly toxins, use of toxins, but there are traps out there as well. So the steering group is key because they're living on the land, as it were. They were well respected in the community and known in the community. It's not a whole lot of strangers coming in and saying, hey, this is what you need to do. It's about the landowners saying, this is what we'd like to do. How can we help? How can you help us? We're committed to developing a genuine relationship with iwi, and that's an ongoing process. We don't want it to be just a tick the box relationship. We actually want an authentic relationship. So we're working on that all the time, which we're really excited about. If we can go to the slide, thank you. So we're using Trap.nz app, which is probably well known to a lot of you. So this map represents, if you have a look at the bottom of the page, the Maunga. You can see the Waikato River as our border and a vague dotted line about approximately where our the boundary is. So the red dots represent the traps, and whether or not you can tell on there, there's about 500 traps out there at the moment that I have on the map. There's more. There's also about 120 bait stations, which aren't shown on this map. This is a great tool to see where the gaps are, and it looks a bit gappy at the moment, but not all the traps are on the map at this stage because it's still early days in our project. But to note, we've only funded 100 traps out there. So those other 400 traps and 120 bait stations are already out there before we've even started. Plus, like I said, there's a whole lot more that aren't on the map. I know it's not all about stats and catching things, but people like to know about catching things. So there's the monthly stats from May, and that's a lot of pests that are coming out just in last month, just from the traps that we have that we know out there at the moment. One of the perks that Bill Garland has told me about Trap.nz, who he wasn't keen on using initially, was that only he knew where the bait stations were on his property, but now he's got this, the more located, GPS located, his workers now fill the bait stations for him. And he said it's a good way to keep track of his workers. And I asked him what he meant by that, and he said, well, I can find out what time they filled each bait station so I can see how fast they're working. So the perks of Trap.nz you never knew about. Next slide, please. We're working quite closely with Sanctuary Mountain Maungatautari, and they're very excited about our project, obviously, because it very much benefits them. So this map here obviously is the Maunga in green, and this is a 3-kilometre buffer zone of properties, which represents just under 50 properties or 39 landowners. The northern face, which is the area that we are protecting, that we want to protect, represents about 1/3 of their predator-proof fence. And it's the northern face that gets the worst weather. It's most exposed, it gets the most incursions, and most possum sightings are seen in this area. So they're very excited if we can get more and more landowners on board. Although they have a relationship with the closest adjacent landowners, they don't go very far out. So that's where we can come in and work with getting that 3-kilometre buffer zone. Speaking with them, they've also even suggested that when staff are out there doing lots of predator-proof fence maintenance, which they do regularly, if the owners consented, they would be able to check the boundary traps as well. So we're constantly talking with them about how we can work together to make this a good solution for us all. I think that's probably me. Thanks, Paul.
My name is Paul Drage, and I have lived at 4/398 Lockhart Road since 2012. Our land has a block of bush on it, which we share with our neighbours on the Pukekura Hill Range. Since 2013, with the help of the fund from the Regional Council, a small group of neighbours have been trapping mustelids, rats and possums. The increase of native birds over this 9-year period has been significant. We now regularly see kaka, bellbird, falcon and the occasional robin. We have generally seen an increase in interest from the community, as we are all aware that we have the largest sanctuary in Aotearoa on our doorstep, and our streams and bush blocks on the hills offer sanctuary and corridors to the suburbs. It's hard to ignore a squawking kaka from overhead or an increasing dawn chorus. Local farmers talk positively about the initiative that the Regional Council took with removing the presence of possums within the area as part of TB control 15 years or so ago. We now have a very different situation, with possums being an issue throughout the area. My impression is that the community is generally open and positive, being actively involved with predator control on their property. Farmers are increasingly concerned about the increase in possums, and if funding for effective predator control can be secured, then I believe that there will be sufficient interest from landowners to want to be involved. Over time, I believe that with community involvement, we are likely to encourage farmers that have previously not had the time or funding to be involved. With the assistance of automated traps and funding to assist with contractors will go a long way for farmers to feel supported by this initiative. As a member of the steering committee, I'm keen to offer my support to the project and to help encourage the community to be involved.
Thank you. So we're going to open to questions now, and am I finished with questions? Yep, so I'll tell them when it's finished. So who's first? You can sit at the table too, Joe, so 3 of you are there. And just move the speaker around so the people online can hear your answers. Joe.
Yeah, kia ora. Stu Kneebones, look, I just farm over the other side of the river at Whitehall. Are you familiar with the Whitehall Te Miro PPCA, Possum Control Project? Yeah. So, look, I really like what you're wanting to do here, but I've got some concerns based on the experiences we had in Whitehall. So we started off with exactly the same sort of ambition. We had all of the farmers keen to do stuff. Probably the only difference, we didn't have Maungatautari on our back doorstep, but self-help type scenario, no shortage of enthusiasm. But sort of 12 months down the track, we did a bit of a stock take, and we found that A, the RTCs had continued to climb, and B, we found the vast majority of all the bait and that farmers had purchased at cost that I and a couple of other guys had personally delivered to all the farms was sitting in the back of the shed and hadn't been used, because while there was no shortage of enthusiasm, there was a big shortage of time commitment when push came to shove, and they had their farm work to do. So hence we moved to the scheme where the council now manage it for us, and we self-rated ourselves for a while, and it's now included in the biosecurity rate generally, and it's working very well. my understanding is around the country, regional councils have successively moved away from those self-help schemes for the very same reasons. So I can see, I mean, I saw on that map you had with the bait stations or traps, whatever they were. I saw Garland's farm and I saw the Easton's property, where obviously steering group members that are very passionate are doing some good stuff. I'm really worried that you're going to have a whole lot of its enthusiasm that doesn't turn into actions on the ground in the bigger part of the area, through no fault of anyone's, and certainly through no fault of enthusiasm. So I'm just concerned about how you're going to address that, because I just don't want to see us repeat the same mistakes again.
So before you go, so your question in all of that is?
Do you understand my question? I think.
I can respond to your statements.
Well, my question is, I can't see how you're going to get, based on the experience that we've had, that the regional council had, that a whole lot of other regional councils around the country have had, I can't see how you're going to get the buy-in from those farmers on the ground. They'll be enthusiastic, but history tells us that they can't deliver because they've got a whole bunch of other commitments. Hence, we moved to a contractor-based scheme.
So my first point before I hand over to Karen, who's working with those farmers, is that we are funding and supporting through multiple funding streams paid coordinators to work with farmers.
Which we did as well, and that didn't help. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks for your question, Stu. So basically, I think, and I don't know a huge amount about the Whitehall project, but things that I think we have going for our projects that, like you said, we do have the Maunga, we have 2 natural boundaries. We've got a low residual trap RTC already. It's only 7.8%, whereas I think yours was a lot higher when you started.
Yep. So is that over the whole of that area?
It's over the whole area. So we did monitoring in May 2020. Right. So it's quite low, and we were surprised at how low it was. So we have a low rate already. We will be doing monitoring after years 1 and 3 to keep on track to see if we are going down at the rate we're happy with. The area was a former TB operation, and the benefit of years of control, which is why the RTC was so low. There's been a big mindset change, I think, since Predator-Free 2050, and that more people want to be involved. Like I said already, that there is a whole lot of people doing lots of restoration work already off their own bat. I go out to drop off traps and it's like, do you want to come and see the wetlands that we're restoring? So there's already people doing that and they're aware. And they're not even seeing the birds on their property yet because they're not close enough, but they're still doing that work. There's only 160 landowners, which I don't think is a huge amount. It's 200 properties, but it's 160 landowners. There is rural communities are amazing in that they already have strong connections between them. I'm getting into that group now. My kids go to school with their kids. They already know me a little bit. I'm getting neighbours that get traps off me, then their neighbours say, oh, actually, they're approaching me and saying, oh, you help my neighbour Phil next door, can I have some traps too? So there's a lot of people coming on board, and it's just word of mouth. We've got the steering group, of which we've got some keen restoration people like Paul here, Bill Garland, Takaputo Estate, so Marianne Eason. So a huge lot of people that are well known in the community already, and they know, I say, Sam had Paul's name, how to do Trap NZ, talk to your mate Paul, he knows how to do it, they can help there. So we've got lots of support there. We have budgeted for contractors in years 2 and 3. So the first year we really want to see, it's the keen people approaching me, and they're the ones that I'm working on at the moment because I'm kept busy enough with that. But we do have funding that we'd like to apply for future years. Automatic traps, absolutely, farmers are all about them, especially some of the bigger properties. And that's something that we've listened to right from the start when we first started talking in 2020. A lot of people are choosing to live here for the reason that it's so close to Sanctuary Mountain. There's a lot more lifestylers coming in, and they're choosing this life. They're choosing to live here because they want to have birds spitting out into their backyards. And so they already know that this is what they want to do. I sometimes think being part of Go Eco, it's independent from council. and without sort of dropping anybody out, not everybody is a big fan of council. We're independent, so they feel like they can come to us and have a chat about, well, this used to happen, but it doesn't now. What can you do for us? So we are listening, and we're aware of what's happened, and you know that perhaps some farmers might not want to deal with council, but they might want to deal with us because we're not council. I hate to say that in the council room. We have done the legwork and we've spoken to landowners and involved them from early on, so we do know their concerns. And time and to check traps is a big concern. A lot of them do have bait stations, and that's fine if they want to carry on that. A lot of people aren't getting into it because they have bigger properties and they can't afford the traps. So helping them with traps is a huge thing for them. There's one dairy farm, and they've done heaps of restoration work, planting out wetlands and everything. They haven't done any predator control because they've focused all their money into planting and fencing. So this is the next stage for them, and they're simply stoked that Bush to Burbs is there to help them with the traps because they don't have any knowledge and they don't have the funds for it. The birds and bats are visiting anyway, and people, the last thing people want to see is the birds and bats arriving and you know, and dying as soon as they reach the, you know, jump over. So people don't want to see that. They're excited that robin are following around them in the garden, particularly, you know, the closer ones. They're excited by that, and the more they see the birds jumping over the fence, the more they want to do. So I think the mindset has really changed, and I think that's key. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I'm not convinced, and I guess I'm just wondering, should it be a little bit more focused in terms of certain areas, or should we get some sort of buy-in from the landowners before we go the whole hog? Because you can kind of see where the buy-in is there now off that trap rather than, but anyway, look, I'll see what other people have to say, and we've got a bit of
Please,
thinking
may
to
I,
do.
I just interject one thing that I've noticed in the last 18 months, the 80-20, it's a game changer for farmers because they don't need to do anything with it. It's set up.
Yeah.
It's very effective at controlling possums, and we've seen a number of farmers really get on board because of that. The issue is funding.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I really like the work that you do. You've done a huge range of work within the community, and I see a huge amount of enthusiasm and commitment from the people within your group. So I just want to thank you for what you've done in the past as well as what you're proposing now. So I see that the funding you're requesting is just for traps. I can't see anything there that you don't seem to be looking for bait, money for bait. At least that's what and I just wanted to ask you about that. So does that mean that you are wanting to encourage people to trap rather than use toxins? So that was one question. My other question was just around, are you also addressing the animal welfare issues around trapping, making sure that people are checking the traps? You know, you're talking about automatic self-setting traps, which is great, but if you are also using other traps, are you making sure that they're checking them every 24 hours? Those are probably my main questions. I might have one more. I'll just see how you respond.
The live capture traps. So we're promoting humane kill traps. So they're traps that are the NAWAC traps, approved traps. So they are kill traps, so not live capture. There certainly will be live capture traps out there, but that's not the ones we're providing. So we're not. So we are promoting trapping as opposed to using toxins. Obviously, we're not dismissive of toxins, and there is a place in absolutely with larger properties, but this project is a trapping one. We want to get more people on board, and there's a lot of people that don't want to use toxins. They've had problems in the past with secondary poisoning and such. So there's, like I said, there's lifestyle blocks out there. There's a whole lot of people with pet animals that are concerned. We can get more people on board if we're promoting trapping than toxin use.
Thanks. I don't need to ask any more. Thank you.
Anybody online? Fred, I didn't see you.
Yeah, look, I totally think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And when it comes generally for dollars spent, money that we take from you in rates and then give you a little bit back, we really do get value for money. And I totally appreciate what you're doing in your area personally. and wish you all the well with that project. Thank you.
Well, kia ora koutou. That's your presentation done. That's all the questions asked. I wanted to be asked. There's none online. So thank you. We do go into the next stage and you will be let know the outcome of today in at least the next 7 days, a week. Okay? So thank you.
Kia ora koutou, thank you.
If the next slide is ready, Judy, can you bring them in, please? That's okay. Okay. If they're there, bring them in. If not, I'll just count them off as they go. It's not anybody who's doing anything around pest control. You know, we've got a pest proof, what's her name, 20 to 2050, you know. But nobody's trying to get rid of these. And then the next time I go to the
Kia ora.
Kia ora. I am jumping the queue, giving you some time back. That's right. Well, I thought.
We just got
Ah, yes.
I'll just give you a general idea of when we start. Of course, you at the end of that.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Wow, fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Kia ora. Indeed. True. Great.
Let's take from Thames Coromandel.
Yes.
Online, you've got Barry Quayle, our chair, who
Ah,
is
yes.
Angela Strange, who I believe you've got a as well. Now, I am there you go. Yeah, I see. My secretary. Is running the show. So that's who we have. So the table's all yours. It's what, 2:15? Yep, 2:15.
Yep.
All yours.
Well, kia ora. Thank you very much. So, kia ora tēnā koutou katoa, no mahari mai, ko Tim Houston toko ingoa. Ko kamatua o Mahakirau Forest Sanctuary. So look, just thanks for the opportunity to be here. First, I'd just quickly like to apologise because we had intended to have a number of the committee members here today to support this presentation. Unfortunately, the chair, Jude, got called to Auckland, and Sarah, who is probably an interesting mind of information on the topics we're going to touch on today, is currently advising into Project Kiwi up the top of the peninsula. So they've both been called away, which has left me with the enjoyment of presenting to you today. I guess just to use the 10 minutes really punctually and quickly, I fully presume that you've all kind of had the opportunity to digest the information that's submitted. What I thought I might just quickly do is just quickly retouch on who we are, where we've come from, what we're doing, and in particular what this particular application is about. Why would we be applying for this? I should note we have been the recipients, beneficiaries of Natural Heritage Fund previously, which we applied for in 2017, 5 years ago, and was for just over 3 years. I could imagine there may be questions you might want to know what some of the outcomes that came out of that are. This program of work is now a kind of an evolution, a next step of being able to leverage the benefit of that. So if you're comfortable, let me just quickly sprint through the presentation. Okay, next slide. Yep, let's jump into them. And interesting. There's been a little bit of a reshuffle going on in the process. Never mind. Look, the presentation I have here is not really to add more information to what's already been submitted. It's more to inspire you as to what Mahakirau Forest is all about. It is different from many of the other programs of work, and I guess that's the point I want to try and get across. So just very briefly, the Mahakirau Forest Incorporated Society was set up over 20 years ago, in 2001. Its founding members, 18 neighbouring property owners that we all brought together. And since that time, we've built the program to be running over 620 hectares of biodiversity protection. I'll quickly mention in passing the previous fund was to help us actually set up the crucial infrastructure to do that, which we successfully achieved. And in fact, we achieved the success measures, the KPIs for that during that program of work. So we're a community-led conservation group. We also work on adjacent dockland, although that's not part of the submission for this funding round. That's a separate piece of work that we do to one side. A couple of things that are quite unique to what we do is we, from our outset 23 years ago, we've had a kind of a whole of ecosystem approach and a whole of biodiversity approach to the work we've been doing. So we're not singularly, for example, and not picking on anybody in particular, but we're not singularly, for example, a Kiwi conservation group. We're not singularly looking at avian species only. And what we've found over the 20 years is we've actually found a whole run of very endangered species, which has now brought our focus into that particular area. Now, our submission was titled A Trilogy of Taonga, and that's because we have 3 particular endangered species, all of them actually up on that slide there, which we are becoming increasingly anxious about our obligation and responsibility to protect them. And what we really need this funding for is to help us understand, community-led program, to help us understand in the field the biodiversity requirements that we need to allow these populations to sustain themselves. Why these three? And I'll jump ahead. I actually had this a little later in my presentation, but why these three? That's great. They are all endemic to the Waikato. They are all highly vulnerable and highly endangered. And one of them in particular is predicted to be the next butterfly extinction potentially in the world. So we take that, we have discovered these species here almost by accident, and we've been focused on that very, very much over the last 5 to 10 years. We now have abundant populations of them, but we need to undertake the research to understand whether we're actually having any fundamental effect to the critical ecosystem that's there. So quickly moving on, Mahakirau Forest, as many of you will know, you can see on the map on the right-hand side of that slide, we're kind of sitting almost smack in the middle of the peninsula. We also sit smack in the middle of extensive state and native forest. And we are identified as an area of significant natural values. And we sit up high, so we're actually portions of the forest are higher than Castle Rock, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with as a landmark. So we have a number of the key peaks of the Coromandel Ranges as part of this forest. We're surrounded 70% by DOC managed land, which gives us a benefit. And the other benefit we've got, which is a crazy benefit that was received by the fact that when the land back almost 30 years ago was subdivided, a private road was put in, and that road gives us access deep into the forest, which otherwise we wouldn't have. So that's pretty much about who we are and the actual location. This project now, after 20 plus years of fundamentally focusing extensively on protection, we now recognise the need to shift some of our focus, maintain the protection, but shift our focus towards restoration. And whilst this is specifically about those three species sit in an ecosystem which fundamentally supports many, many, many other species as well. So we're using those three species as our key drive. As I mentioned, they're all endemic to the Waikato. They're all highly vulnerable. We do have established populations, and a really good example is the striped gecko, where 80% of all sightings ever in the world have happened at Mahakirau Forest. And the Helms butterfly I'll mention in a few moments. So our solution to this, and maybe you can move on to the next slide, please, is what you helped us do. You were foundational, you being our regional council, were foundational for us to set up an infrastructure, which you can see on the map on the right-hand side there. Every one of those dots is some form of trap or bait station or what have you. And to put that in perspective, that would probably be the most intense predator control programs probably on the peninsula, potentially in the region, and maybe in the country. But the reason is because of these tiny species we're trying to protect. These species have very, very small home ranges. So as a consequence, it's really essential for us to be like that. Now, since the funding round was completed for the last Natural Heritage Fund, which was completed about 2 years ago, we've continued to sustain the program ourselves across maintaining all of those stations and all of those traps at a very intense level. What we're wanting to shift to now, which is the 3 bullet points there, the academic research, biodiversity education, and the community engagement around these specific species, because we believe that there is an opportunity that is found by the fact that we don't think that these species only exist here. But at the moment, we have so little information about them that we simply don't know. So we're saying use this site as a site for us to gather that information, share that information with other community conservation groups in particular, and we suspect we will actually start to see these species being protected elsewhere by some simple techniques and so on. So that's our fundamental program. Perhaps next slide, please. So I thought I would just quickly share with you what the 3 species are, just very briefly. Helm's butterfly, once very widely abundant across New Zealand. Recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a global specialist who studied these butterflies, never seen them in the wild, came to New Zealand, studied, went around New Zealand for over 3 months looking for this butterfly, and only found 5, and only found them at Mahakirau. Since then, we have now tracked down where we actually are finding eggs, we're finding caterpillars, we're finding all the stages of their life cycle. Next slide, please. So I just wanted you to, this is the heartstring bit, which is I wanted you to know what these things are. So northern striped gecko, you're probably aware of, only first sighted in 1997. Fundamentally, only about half a dozen sightings in the following 10 years. We now have hundreds of individuals recorded in our database at Mahakirau. Now, we're not suggesting that Mahakirau is the only place where these are, but at the moment, the fact that 80% of them are being sighted here, we're turning around and going, that puts a real obligation, we feel a real burden of obligation to make sure that they survive here until we can be sure of the others. And the third one, I'm sure you'll always all be familiar with. Next slide, please. Is the Archie's frog. The most, as it states there, the most ecologically distinct and globally endangered amphibian in the world. New Zealand has 4 remaining native frogs. It originally had 7. We've got 4 left. This is by far the most crucial, with huge cultural significance for Māori, and in particular Māori of the region. This only really survives in the kind of mist forests. And we have got probably the largest recorded hotspot, certainly the only place where they're currently studied. So what I quickly wanted to do was the solution for us was threefold. We can maintain ourselves the general pest control program that we've got running, but we need to keep it highly intensified, and that's what we're struggling with, and a small portion of the funding we would like to go towards allowing us to continue that intensified effort in particular atolls where these exist. The second thing would then be to undertake a site-specific in-the-field study. We have a number of academic partners already. We've got about 5 or 6 academic organisations, institutions that participate with us on a regular basis. I'm talking every quarter. We have somebody down there studying one of these species, actually gathering that information, not to try and be an endangered species recovery plan that DOC might do, but to try and be an in-the-field program of work that we can advise other groups so that they know what they're looking for and that we can actually start to protect them more broadly than just on this site. And thirdly then was to actually take that and educate that across the region and run a small, succinct little education program over the next 3 years. So that's fundamentally our program. We believe it's got really good alignment to the fund. You know, it's protecting and restoring. It's multi-generational. It's very high ecological value of the area. It's community-led and it's community benefit. So we kind of look at that in terms of, we think it ticks many of those boxes that the fund was set up for. We think it also ticks many of the boxes for WRC from a strategic priority point of view as well, especially water. And I should mention that this forest is the headwater for 7 first order streams. It has catchments that go both into the Whitianga side, but also the Manaia Coromandel side. There's catchments going both ways. So we believe that it actually adds value in there, but the key focus of it is about trying to work out the biodiversity requirements and in particular reverse biodiversity loss for these species. So I'll stop there. I've overrun my 10 minutes. I know I must have.
Enthusiasm is a good thing.
Yes, I'll stop and.
Yeah. So the floor is.
Thanks. Look, really like the work you guys do, and I was on the council when we approved your last one. My question is around public benefit in terms of access, and I'm not in any way suggesting you have open access, because I know you've got some somewhat questionable neighbours not far down the road from you.
Indeed.
But
challenge us.
Just want to understand, I see educational opportunities. Are you guys open to school groups and things like that coming through for biodiversity studies and things like that? Just so I guess where I'm coming from is we're putting public money in here. You're doing some great stuff. Like the concept of the public being able to enjoy that in a positive way, not a negative way. That's negative for you guys either. Yeah.
Well, a great question, and I think I can answer it pretty succinctly, because we've always, our vision for Mahakirau Forest 20-something years ago was about it being a wellspring of endemic biodiversity. What we started to realise in the last 10 years is by wellspring, it doesn't just mean that the species are healthy and that the environment's healthy, but about the fact that we can actually be a wellspring with regards to the knowledge and that we're sharing. So what is not contained in this submission, particularly because I felt that it was actually a distraction, a year before lockdown, 3 years before lockdown, we started on a program to build an education centre in the forest, specifically for the purpose that you stated. We actually completed that. We started fundraising that a year before lockdown, and we completed it about 6 months into lockdown, surprisingly enough. And that's a facility that's there with the sole intent of it being available to academic partners to come and research from, school kids and so on, to be able to come up and actually share in the biodiversity that we have. And it's located, if you like, kind of in the middle of the conservation area, so that therefore you can literally kind of step out the door and be in the area of. Now, our reason for doing that, and it took some effort, as you can imagine, trying to fundraise for that, the local business community were extraordinarily supportive, but was simply to answer into the question that you're putting to, so therefore give a tangible place where people can come, that we can run programs. And part of our little education portion of this fund would be to help us sustain that program of work, right? Of course, COVID's come flying on in like it has for most of us, and kind of upset the program of work that we were wanting to run there. So we have had it to date. We've had about probably half a dozen gatherings of 30 people or more. It still remains a centre for conservation knowledge sharing. And through, for example, predator-free Haraki Coromandel, we actually run a number of events there to support programs like that, and Moiho and others, you know, so look, the answer is yes. It is private land, so we do need to be cognizant of the fact that we can't open it like a national park.
Absolutely,
Partly because we all have liability. So we need to manage that very, very carefully.
And I like your answer. Thank you. Cool.
Thank you. Dennis.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the work you do. I think you're probably world famous, at least in the Coromandel.
Thank you, Dennis.
And probably wider. I was interested in just to drill down to one of the species, the butterfly. Yeah, I think you mentioned that someone went in for 3 months and found 5, but you'd found some other indications of life. Can you give us, is it possible to give us some indication of just how many you think are out there, just how endangered, how close to extinction?
Well, I'd be very brave to do that, I have to say. The thing that surprised us with the Helms butterfly, or the forest ringlet as it's called, was that it used to be so prolific. It used to be north of Auckland, extensive through the Waikato, into the Taranaki, even in the north of the South Island, believe it or not. And the expert that I'm talking about is a gentleman by the name of Steve Wheatley, who works for David Attenborough's Global Butterfly Trust. He'd been studying this butterfly, so I'll do a little anecdotal story quickly, but he'd been studying this butterfly for about 20 years, never seen it actually in the wild because it only exists here. So he came up specifically to find it. We knew we'd sighted some up at Mahakirau, but at that point we didn't think that there was anything particularly unique about Mahakirau until he spent the 3 months around all the areas where it had been reported previously. And it was literally in his last 2 days that he came to our place and found 5 of them. And that made us really sit up and start to understand. Now, the main reason there are 2 main reasons for the demise of the habitat loss is a substantial one, and predation is another one. So just very briefly in answer to your question, we now know that we have breeding, we are supporting a breeding cycle up there. Found the eggs, we found across the list, we've done all those things. Do we know whether it goes further afield, down towards the coast or further along the peninsula? We don't know. Do we know that they exist Rongia or somewhere else? We don't know. And the main reason is because there's very little information about them, actually. So at the moment, what we do know is, I think in the last, we surveyed for them at a particular time. In the last survey, we cited over a dozen of them, which is pretty extraordinary considering they're only this big. And the eggs are the size of a pinhead. So, and they lay 1 egg,
Really, just one?
Yeah, one. You find one. Now, so I guess for me, it'll be almost impossible for me to make any formal prediction as to whether there are still pockets of these all over the place or whether they're not. What we know is that this is the last place where they've been seen in the last 4 or 5 years. And for us, that as a community, we feel an immense obligation to try and understand them better so we can understand what the answer is. All we know is that the academics are telling us, and it is formally acknowledged, that this could be the next butterfly extinction. And that could be on the list of extinctions for that. So we're just sitting there at this moment with not sufficient information to be able to answer a question like that. And that's exactly what the program is trying to achieve. So I'm sorry, not a particularly compelling answer.
Long way of saying no.
I'm happy with your answer.
Long way of saying no. Thank you very much. Yes, yeah.
Kathy,
Thank you. Yes, I know you've got a lot of committed people up there, and I thank you for the work that you're doing there. My questions are specifically to do with the amphibians side of things. I know that someone by the name of Bruce Waldman did a lot of work on the Coromandel Peninsula. He was a herpetologist working for Canterbury University around the time of the fungus that was affecting.
Yes,
yes, I can never say that word. But I know that he was a little unpopular because he made some claims around there needing to be some studies around the effect of toxins on amphibians.
Yes.
And he ended up leaving New Zealand, went to Seoul, worked at Seoul University, and he's now running Integrative Sciences Department at Oklahoma State University.
Okay, I didn't know that.
But he contacted me to say that when he was in Seoul, he did a study on the impacts of 1080 on Asiatic toads. Right. And it's a study which is about to be published, but it had extremely high mortality. So I guess my question for you is around the toxins, because I mean, you're near to Doc, who uses 1080 in a landscape scale, but you're also using bait stations, and so I guess I want to know whether you've considered just using traps, and also whether you're conscious of the types of toxins that you are using. For instance, are you using Brodifficum, which is the one that has the highest risks in terms of secondary poisoning?
Of course.
And so if you're conscious of that, what have you done
to
minimise the risks? And were you conscious of this research, especially around you saying, frogs are an indicator species and they need a really healthy habitat, etc. Are you conscious of how dangerous some toxins can be.
Yes, so
Before you answer, can you pass around your answers?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Certainly, of course I can. I'll try to do exactly that. Was I aware of that particular piece of research? No. Part of what we're wanting to do is actually pull in things like that. We have always been very, very cognizant about the use of toxins. We use toxins, and that's simply been after 20 years worth. We have realised that with the resources we have available, we simply can't achieve the outcomes we want without them. And a really good example would be, for example, we currently control 11 different species of predator. One of those would be part of the focus of this, which is wasps. And so you're probably aware of the Bespex toxin that's available. And without that, we do not think that we could protect the butterfly. So, and you can understand. With regards to 1080, we have utilised 1080 within forest, Mahakirau forest in the past. We have continually reduced back our toxins, so we do substantially trap, especially during the winter months, substantially trap. The last time I undertook a study of, and I'll try and wrap up on this point, but the last time I undertook a study to try and achieve the same outcomes we had with toxins, with trapping, it was going to take, we assessed that it was going to take us about 8 times as much labour effort to be able to do so. And that was on the presumption that there would be some species, like I mentioned, wasps, where you simply would be unable to capture them, right? So you'd have to continue using. And I guess being a realist, we've sat there going, we need to be able to protect this environment the best way we can. We simply don't have resources to be able to put in 8 times as much physical effort. And that's the conundrum that we all face. Just quickly summing up, and I won't give an anecdote around this, but we have always been immensely cognizant of the toxins that we're using. And with regards to things like brodifacoum, no, we don't utilise brodifacoum as a direct toxin anymore. It is part of double tap, and we do use that selectively at very specific moments in the annual cycle. So one of our focuses has been very much to get the best return for the investment we have to put to try, and the best return is the protection of species for us. It's not about killing things. If we could kill less things and achieve the same outcome, that would be our intent. But at the moment with these particular species, we simply don't know what level of protection is necessary to allow them to flourish. They seem to be flourishing now, so that suggests we've got to a point. But I hope in some ways that's answered the question. Yes, we're challenged by toxins, the use of toxins as well, and we take it very seriously.
I just had, you can give me a one sentence for this one. When you said intensified predator control, what did you mean? Because you've got baseline and then you've got intensified.
Yeah, so our baseline would be, for example, to hold possum numbers extremely low, to hold, to continue stoke programs, to keep rat numbers across the whole estate probably below about 10%. Our intensified control, we currently believe that we need rat numbers to be below 2% to give suitable protection for these species. So we're looking at a lot of the other programs which are looking at, this arbitrary 5% rat number to allow relocation of species. And we're suddenly going, we don't think it's coming close enough. So the intensified work is in particular pockets. So you'll notice that the overall program is about 600 hectares. We're talking about an intensified program of about 400 hectares. So hopefully that helps. I'm sorry, I've taken up time. I apologize. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, So that's us for the day, and I was lucky enough to explain to you the next steps. So thank you, Tim. And after this, we have one more, then deliberations. And like I said, our team will come back to you within at least the next 7 working days.
Good luck with the deliberations, and again, apologies that the rest of the team couldn't be here. But
you did a good job on your own. So
thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Sorry, 3:30 is last person, last group. Who are these teams? Coast Care. Well done, guys. Doing well. Wow. They're fighting someone. Who we got here? That's right. Thames Coast Kiwi Care Incorporated. Who's that over there? Oh, what's his name? Yeah, back. Ka pai tēnā, ka rere koutou. Kia ora. So I'm going to quickly introduce us to yourselves. I don't know if you know the rules or not, but once I've asked you to start speaking, you got 10 minutes for presentation. Got a half an hour up, but we need 20 minutes for questions. And somehow or other, the answers are like a story. So I will be keeping you tabs. You're the last one for us for today before we go away and do some more work around this. So welcome to the table. You have Kathy White from Taupo, Stu Newbone from Waipa King Country, Fred Litchmark from Waikato Raglan, Dennis Teague from Coromandel Thames online. You've got Barry Quayle from Hamilton, Angela Strange, Hamilton, Pamela Story from Waikato Huntley. You saw that? And our koro is just leaving, Hugh Verco from Matamata Piako. And you've got myself, I'm Katarana Hodge. I'm the one of the 2 Māori constituents councillors. And on this side of me, you've got Greg Ryan, who's our director for ICM. And you've got over here our #1 secretary today, and who's been a damn big help. And at the back, of course, you've got different staff around who all belongs to Greg's team, except for Sarah at the back, who is Democracy Services. So welcome to the table. Once I let you go, like I said, 10 minutes for your presentation. I have been nice up today and let people go over for some unknown reason. People don't know how to tell the time. But what that does, it cuts down our questioning time from our councillors around the room. So I think for us to get a real good understanding of how your team works, your 10 minutes is important so people can ask the questions. Ka pai? So I guess you're the lady in the middle on the side of those 2 thorns, and you're going to be the lead, huh? All yourself. Go for it.
Thank you very much. Tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you for the opportunity to present to Council today. So on my left, we've got Finn Buchanan, who is the technical leader and actually the founder of Thames Coast Kiwi Care. And on my right, we've got Rick Balfour, who is a committee member and also a previous coordinator.
Go for it. And you are?
And I'm Moira Coatsworth, and I'm lucky enough to be the chair of this group.
All yours, Sarah.
Thank you.
Go for it.
So our purpose is protecting both kiwi and the habitat. And our project started in 2006 when the Peninsula project were already doing the browser control. So we stepped in to do mustelid trapping. But since 2010, when the Peninsula project ceased, all the private land has only had our mustelid trapping. And that's why Carolyn King's comments about single trapping are really what underlies our coming to you today. We've only got single method trapping on the private land. So what we are asking is we're wanting to continue with our current mustelid trapping for kiwi protection, and that's by way of contributing to a coordinator, but we're wanting a significant increase to add possum and rat control back in for habitat restoration. And the ask around that is we need a new project leader. We need to add AT 220 traps to our existing trap lines. We want to reopen tracks and reinstall bait stations. And we want to undertake the bait operation in the years that DOC does their aerial drop to complement that. So that's what we're here to ask you about today. Firstly, I want to acknowledge Ngāti Tamatera, who are mana whenua. We only have one iwi as mana whenua in our project area, and we've been really blessed to have their support right throughout the project. This picture shows last year we were returning a juvenile kiwi that had been raised on a predator-free island. So this is a large turnout of Ngāti Tamatera to take the bird back into the forest. I'm just briefly going to give you three highlights really of our record, just to give you some background information. So probably the first standout aspect of our project is our current trapping. So we've got a 16-year record of best practice mustelid trapping. We've got more than 800 traps across over 5,000 hectares. We started with 2,000 hectares 16 years ago, and we've steadily increased to over 5,000 hectares. We've got 60 trappers who trap 115 kilometres of trap line 16 times a year. So, you know, that's a really solid record of trapping. And the reason for that trapping is our kiwi recovery. And I was told by the DOC scientists that there's nowhere our record is as good as it gets in kiwi recovery. So nationwide, there's a 2% decline, and we've had a 10-fold increase. We started when the population was just on the verge of collapse. There were only 28 kiwi estimated to be left. And now we've got, last year, the estimate was 250 in our project area. And we've got another 50 that are being juveniles still on predator-free islands that are being raised. So that's 300 kiwi from an initial population of 28. So our trapping, I think that's the proof of our trapping program. As part of that, we do Operation Nest Egg, and we've got 95 kiwi that we have successfully. We've got 6 transmitted kiwi, and we take the eggs from them. They go to Auckland Zoo, and then they're raised on islands. So I've just got a wee clip. We were featured, some of you may have seen the Fight for the Wild documentaries on TV1, and we're in the last episode called Hope. And it's just a short extract so you can see the country and you can see the our kiwi handler and Nat from Auckland Zoo retrieving a kiwi egg. There's no sound.
When you share your screen, there's a tick box.
It doesn't actually matter. Oh, here we are.
It was there.
If you can't manage the sound, it doesn't matter, Judy. We can just, you'll see that you can, it was to give you a sense of it. So he's talking about kiwi being essential to biodiversity, being essential to people's well-being, but it cuts now into our project area. He's finished. No, this is just the end of, because it's a voice cut off. So this is our Tamata forestry area here. So that's driving up the tomato. And this is our Kiwi handler who goes up and down Dale trying to locate these birds who move around a lot. So they're looking to pick up the signals from the transmitter. They know he's sitting on the eggs and they're looking for the burrow. They've located the burrow and there she is going in to collect the egg. So I guess what I'm saying is we've got best practice trapping, a long record. We've got a stellar result with Kiwi recovery, but it's really down to our community. I think we realised at the National Kiwi Hui we're quite unusual in the extent of community participation. I mean, these are small communities on the west coast of the Coromandel, but we've always been community led. We've had really strong landowner support right throughout, as well as from Ngāti Tamatera. All those 60 trappers that go out every fortnight in summer and monthly in winter are volunteers. So it's most groups, they've got contract trappers, 1 or 2 who go in. We're managing an army of 60 volunteers, making sure they can do best practice trapping safely. And so we actually clock up in this little small community over 4,000 community hours this last year. That's an average of 11 hours for every day of the year. And our support's continually growing till we've got over 500 supporters now. The guy on the right in the photo usually wears a suit and is a specialist engineer in Auckland. And we picked that photo because I think it shows you how much people enjoy being part of the project. He was part of a firm that came down, the whole crew came down on a Saturday and did a track clearance for us. So yeah, that's really the third component of our strong base for this project, is the extent of community participation. I'd like to go on now and just talk to you about what we're asking for. So the first component is to continue some funding of our coordinator. There you see her auditing traps, doing environmental education, doing some awareness raising in a street parade. So she's got a really varied role and it's absolutely full to capacity. And it's the real linchpin. I mean, you can't have 60 trappers engaged safely and effectively without really good support. And that's what this coordinator role provides. So we can't ask her to do more, and this is a significant step up, this new project. So we really need, while we're in the establishment phase, we need a project leader for the habitat restoration. And she or he will be involved in consulting with landowners, gaining the approvals and doing ongoing liaison well there. This person needs to lead the trap installation and all the ongoing servicing. And so we'll be using volunteers to get the AT220s onto our trap lines. So we need somebody managing that. The third role is to design and implement the possum and rat baiting regime that supports the dock operations. So they need to do a pretty solid job there. And fourthly, we've put in for contract track cutters to actually reopen the tracks that were previously used, and this person will need to supervise that. So that's the second component of our ask to you. You will have seen the map. So this is our project area. It's 5,000 hectares. The shaded area is the buffer zone that we're wanting to firstly get our AT220s in our bait operation in. So everything to the right of that is the dock estate. They're really excited by the proposal and they want to also contribute by, they've got a strip where they don't do their aerial operation. They want to do the baiting there as well. And our largest private landowner, Tamata Forestry, which is 400 hectares, we're negotiating with them at the moment about what contribution they will make. So that's our map. The actual traps that we've chosen are the AT220s because they are a pest control method that can be managed by our volunteers. So they're self-resetting, they're auto-luring kill traps, and they will go on our existing trap lines. So the big advantage is once they've been set up and any any kinks ironed out, they will be able to transfer back and be maintained by our current trappers. We just, since this presentation was done, Bay Bush has released to us, they're putting out a report next week, which is a 1-year trial of the AT220s up north. So if you're interested in effectiveness, ask Finn. We've brought along that data. They've released data to us for this purpose today before their report comes. So that's the possum and rat trap. So I guess you don't need me to tell you what's important about habitat restoration. So that's the big advantage of re-establishing habitat restoration. But for our taonga species kiwi, rats and possums, although they're not, they're not a target species, the rats compete for food. And I've just put a clip up here. It's also from the Fight for the Wild documentary. It was taken down in Stewart Island, but it gives you a sense of the kind of interaction that takes place between possums and our kiwi. Oh, you won't have sound on this one either, will you? Okay.
Have you got much more after
No,
this?
that's the last slide. So
Okay.
so
what's in there?
I can just talk to that. So unfortunately, if anyone's interested, if you Google Fight for the Wild, the 4 episodes are up. But what this is showing, it is showing it now. It shows the possum continually harassing the kiwi in the burrow. So the kiwi's sitting on an egg, and this possum would come in maybe every hour all night to try and get to that egg. So yeah, the possums are having a big impact. So look, I think I've kept to the 10 minutes.
Well done, Maura.
It's a bit of a race, but we are really happy to answer your questions. Ngā mihi nui, and thank you again for the opportunity to present to you in person today. I'll hand over to Finn to answer any questions that you've got about the technical.
So Kathy, we have to 3:15, Kathy, so your questions will need to be pretty precise, okay?
Yeah, no trouble. So look, I think it's great what you're proposing, especially in terms of extending the trapping network. I guess my question is just around the bait that you're using in the bait stations. Are you trying to use non-residual toxins? You are, and if so, what are you using? And yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
To a degree, we'll be guided by your own technical experts of what toxin is most appropriate. Right at the outset, we talked about the fact that if you use one method of pest control, evolution works against you. So we will be endeavouring to find the right toxin that landowners are comfortable with, that will give us that secondary knockdown of mustelids that the DOC's aerial operation is achieving as well. So yeah, because we're looking at this in sort of could be 3 to 4 years out, we're hoping that there will be a bit more clarity on what toxin would be appropriate for us to use as a community.
I guess I'm just conscious of the fact that the Thames Coromandel District Council advocates for hunting, trapping and use of non-residual toxins. And I know Ngāti Tamatera, because we've also visited them, have also said they're keen on non-residual toxins. So, use of something like Ferrotox would be great because then there isn't any secondary poisoning. But, just wanted to know whether you were going to be using anything like Verdifficum, or if you're going to be using something like Verdifficum, second generation anticoagulant.
We're working alongside public conservation land. We're allowed to use it.
No.
But yeah, we're open to use your technical people and DOC's technical people will be advising us as well. Also, it'll come down to what individual landowners with the project area are comfortable with.
So on the private land, Verdifficum might be used there, but just not along the DOC boundary. I know DOC don't like Verdifficum.
I guess ultimately, if a landowner said that's what we want to use, we need to listen to.
Dennis.
Thanks. I think you mentioned these AT220 traps, and you maybe have some data. You maybe just briefly share that with us.
It came too late.
Okay, Bay Bush Action, which are a community group, Opua Paihia, that area there, they have run a trial with the AT220 manufacturers. They did 550 hectares, put in 550 these AT220s, and they've monitored what the pest populations have done over a 12-month period. They've achieved 0% rat tracking. I think, without the slides, it's a bit of a shame. 0% rat tracking for at least the last 2 months.
I mean, the trend's just that. And then,
And possums were down well below the 3% two-card bills. Yeah, and we've been really lucky. Maura's been communicating with the AT220 manufacturers. They're going to throw their technical support behind us. So we're pretty confident that it's a good one.
You.
Got another question, just say keep up the good work. Really, really appreciate what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Anybody on that? No.
I just make one more comment. Something I didn't say was when the Peninsula project was operating, Finn was actually the manager of the Peninsula. So going back to re-establish those tracks and reopen those lines and with the landowners, we're kind of ahead of phase one really in the Finn on board.
But so I have a couple, which is because I don't know anything about anything. So is there stress with the mother Kiwi when you take the eggs away?
Well, it's the male Kiwi that sits,
or whoever?
sits on it, but
That's okay then.
yeah.
No, I'm joking. No, I didn't mean that. So is there any stress anywhere?
Well,
Probably
we're
not.
not planning to do it forever. We did it because some of those things are unknown, but they haven't found that. I mean, it's considered best practice, but we're actually finishing it this year. We wanted to get an initial boost, but we're going back to our trapping as the main thing. But the other thing is that the young chicks don't hang around with the parents in the way that most bird populations do. They just leave them. So, want to add anything?
Yeah, well,
to that?
that's what makes Kiwi chicks, Kiwi so vulnerable to mustellas is that they're young when they hatch, basically out on their own. They've got they carry an egg, a yolk sac for a while that gives them nourishment until they can get mobile enough to start feeding. But they're just dumb, wide-eyed little guys who are completely to protect themselves.
Well, that cancels out all other stuff I wanted to ask if they are vulnerable. Well, there's no more questions. Kathy, you got something quick? You have a few
Ask
minutes.
one more question, and it was just when you said about Ngāti Tamatera, can you just explain who you're talking about? And my only reason for this is I've got written here, Ngāti Tamatera, Te Mati Waru Hapu, use trapping, hunting and cyanide only, and their method is proven to work. They use the VM trapping maintenance regime. I know they feel quite strong, that hapu feels quite strongly about that.
So we're on our second generation of kaumatua from Ngāti Tamatera. We started, we will have Riki Rakana and Shutuka Kino as our original. They've passed on and got a group that Dr. Koro Papo,
Adama Chase,
and
Skipper.
Yeah, the three of them
are young
and behind us.
So even with the use of Britificum?
No, we're not going near Bridifacum at the moment.
Okay.
All I said is if we end up with a landowner that insists on it, we need to listen to that. So we're talking about private land here.
So you were, that's based on the Peninsula project work that you did, that there wasn't sort of one system that was put in, that you listened to, talk to private landowners. So you're saying you can't guarantee that we wouldn't use it, but it's not that you're coming advocating.
That's right, exactly.
Does that make it clear?
It does. It's just I'm conscious of the fact that people have said to me a lot that they don't want to use anything that's a residual toxin, and so I'm just trying to bear that in mind when I listen.
Private landowners can use whatever they want.
Yeah, again, with the toxins, you know, are we or are you requesting money from us to pay for the toxins? You are.
The bait
So,
operation
okay.
is 25.
No, I just, just wanted to know, because whether it's public money used for toxins, there is a voice. The other thing was, you are working on the west side of the peninsula, is that correct? Oh, that's why it's the best side then. Of course, thank you.
Okay, well, that's us, and thank you for coming in. No doubt our team will get back to you in at least around about 7 working days, maybe. I might be stretching that too thin. It might be hard. I'm not sure, but they'll come back to you as soon as they can. We will continue meeting after this to go over everything we heard and give our team some idea of our thoughts going forward. Yeah. So thank you for travelling. Hope you have a good trip back and safe travel. So thank you.
Thank you very much again.
Are they good to eat? Did we eat a lot? We ate them more, but I don't know about the kiwi.
But like kōkako.
Yeah. So, yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'll just wait for them to leave. And so what we'll do is that the programmer says cup of tea at 3:30, but we should go and have a cup of tea and come back at 3:30. Okay. So be back at 3:30, so you're out of here before 4. Kapai? Okay. So go and have a cup of tea. I don't know if there's any biscuits or anything out there, but hey,